So hello and welcome to another episode of TopTenz. I'm your host, Karl Smallwood. Yes, that is my real name. And today we're talking about 10 jokes that ended up having a serious influence. And as always, this video is based on an article submitted by a member of our illustrious writing team, this one being Ian 40. If you've got any interest in seeing their social media links, what else they're up to, you can find the links to their socials down below alongside my own. And yeah, while you're down there, let us know your favourite inoffensive joke. I'll start off with one of mine. How do lions like their steak? Raw. Some people will try to dismiss their poor behaviour by insisting that whatever they did was just a joke, brah. True or not, the idea is that if something's a joke, you can't take it seriously, because who would ever take a joke seriously? That's the whole point of a joke. But as it so happens, some jokes do get taken seriously and have some pretty serious repercussions as well. For example, number 10, a Stegosaurus's tail spikes were named thanks to a Far Side joke. Dinosaurs have long fascinated people, and movies like Jurassic Park made them all the more interesting to everyday people, myself included. What's your favourite dinosaur? Mine is an Ankylosaurus. He's got the spikes. There's an entire NBA franchise named after a dinosaur, arguably because Jurassic Park made raptors famous. And while interest in dinosaurs was high, it didn't mean that everybody everywhere knew every detail about dinosaurs. For instance, what do you call the end of a Stegosaurus's tail? The distinctive tail spikes that we're pretty sure serve as a defensive weapon on the dino's tail never actually had a name, scientifically speaking, but in 1982, cartoonist Gary Larson published a Far Side comic in which a caveman is teaching a group of cavemen dinosaur anatomy and labels the tail a thagomizer in honour of the late Thag Simmons. The joke, of course, that a caveman named Thag got a little too on the tail and met his end. Fast forward to 1993, in a paleontologist conference in which a paleontologist is discussing a newly found fossil of the tail and evidence that it was indeed used as a weapon and then grew a new bone later, the scientist in question, lacking a proper name but remembering the cartoon, called it a thagomizer in front of his peers. The name spread from there and is now in published scientific works as the generally accepted name of a Stegosaurus's little tail spikes. Thanks, Larson. Number 9. The FBI wasted about 2 years investigating a joke. Part of the work done by the FBI includes investigating cults and various hate groups, of which there are, unfortunately, quite a few. In 2006, they opened a file on a group called God Hates Goths that they discovered on the internet. Based on their research, God Hates Goths was a religious extremist group with ties to the hateful Westboro Baptist Church. You know, those assholes. Writings found on the internet from the group called for violence against those who defied God, but especially people who were part of the goth subculture. As an investigation continued, the FBI came to believe the group may have committed several acts of arson as well as poisoning mentally handicapped children, but the investigation was hard to manage because finding witnesses was proving impossible. For 2 years, the FBI kept hitting roadblock after roadblock in trying to find any concrete evidence of the crimes committed by the hate group. Then, 2 years after the investigation started, somebody actually read the God Hates Goth website, which you think would be the first thing they do, which included a disclaimer that the entire site was a joke. The FBI quickly thereafter shut down the investigation. Number 8. Babe Ruth's nickname started as a joke. Babe Ruth played baseball over 100 years ago and to this day remains one of the most famous players in the history of the game. Born George Herman Ruth, the nickname didn't come around until 1914 when he caught the attention of Jack Dunn, the owner of a minor league team. Booth was only 19 when Dunn wanted to sign him to the team, but that was still considered underage at the time, which meant he needed a legal guardian's permission to play baseball. So imagine that, I'm Babe Ruth asking his mum to play baseball. In order to skirt the rules a little, Dunn actually became Ruth's legal guardian and thus gave himself permission to sign the young man, which apparently was legal for some reason. The arrangement was vaguely shady, but it also caused people to make the joke that Ruth was Dunn's babe. The name stuck and spread, and thus the legend of Babe Ruth was born. Number 7. A Canadian company started selling canned air as a joke. Once upon a time, people thought that bottled water was a silly idea, but now over 350 billion litres are sold every single year. Admittedly, some people still think it's a little bit silly when tap water in most parts of the world is fine, but it's unlikely bottled water is ever going to go away. 2 Canadians took the idea of a product no one needs to have packaged one step further. They started selling Canadian fresh air as a joke. They ended up getting about $122 for a bag of it on eBay, and so they sold another, and that's when inspiration struck. The two began a business selling canned air to China. Places like Beijing are known for their pretty terrible air quality. I've been there, can confirm, after one day, my snot ran black. So in 2015, the pair were selling hundreds of bottles of air on the Chinese market for between $10 and $20 a piece. Back then, they had cleared a shipment of 500 bottles and were moving towards selling 700 more. Small potatoes, relatively speaking. By 2019, though, the company was making over $300,000 per year. They were getting most of their sales online and in shops in South Korea. They source their air from different locations in Canada, and each bottle has a mask included and enough air for 160 breaths. And this does sound weird, but I went to Switzerland once, and I got off the train in Switzerland, breathed in that fresh pine air, and just remember saying to the friend I was with, I have never breathed air before. So I can see why someone might want that. It's like you have like oxygen bars and stuff as well, don't you? So it does sound weird, but as someone who was like, I would pay money for the experience of breathing real fresh air once again. Anyway, number 6, Newman's own salad dressing began as a joke. One of the most recognizable salad dressing brands in any supermarket is Newman's Own, named for Hollywood legend Paul Newman. By 2021, the company had made over $200 million selling salad dressing, making it an unequivocal success. Remarkably, Newman was inspired to start the company based on a joke between himself and a friend. So according to the writer A.E. Hotchner, who was Newman's neighbour, he'd gone to visit his friend one evening in 1980, just before Christmas. He found Newman in his garage with all the ingredients to make a massive batch of salad dressing, but no way to stir it. He ended up using the paddle for a canoe, and the two of them filled a bunch of wine bottles with the homemade dressing that Newman planned to give away to friends as Christmas presents. Newman had never really intended to get into the business, and it was just something for fun one night, but then the dressing must have been good, because within 2 years, the two men had founded Newman's Own. Number 5. Frosted light bulbs were a prank assignment from GE until someone made one. Sometimes when you start work at a new company, the established employees will haze you by giving you an awful job to do as a joke. Marvin Pipkin had to endure this when he started work at GE back in 1919. At the time, it was an established joke that new employees were assigned the task of producing a frosted glass bulb. The joke was that the company had been trying for years to make a reliable frosted glass light bulb, but had never created one that wouldn't fall apart. They were so brittle that they'd even break during installation. And yet, we've all been there, haven't we? Like, go get me a bucket of tartan paint, a bucket of sparks, some like headlight fluid. Let us know your favourites in the comments of the silly tasks you give to new hires. Just to razzle them a little bit. So when Pipkin came on board as an engineer, the older employees played their usual prank. Pipkin took it seriously and ended up solving the puzzle of frosting a bulb while allowing it to stay strong thanks to a phone call interrupting him and causing him to spill some acid out of the bulb. What had eluded engineers for years was solved by Pipkin in just a few weeks. I bet as well he didn't get paid for it. Number 4. Comedian Hamish Blake won a bodybuilding competition despite not being a bodybuilder. So every so often, someone decides to do something as a joke because they have no business doing it. Often this involves trying to perform a task they don't have the skill to perform, just to see how it'll play out. And I think we've all heard that great pitch for the Olympics of just send one average person to compete in every event so we can see how good these athletes really are. And that's how comedian Hamish Blake ended up in a New York State bodybuilding competition. So Blake was by no means a bodybuilder, and he wasn't even in good shape. But when he entered the 2011 competition, because of his size, he was actually technically the only competitor in the heavyweight weight class. And while that makes for a good joke, it also put the competition judges in a bit of a bind. Blake was not competing against anyone, which meant by default he was the best contender, so he ended up winning the whole thing.
Weight champion is going to be, whether you like it or not, number 11, Hamish Blake.
Is it the old Simpsons joke? The two sweetest words in the English language: default. Number 3. Wristwatches were considered silly when they first appeared. Fashion fads come and go, and some are much more regrettable than others. You rarely see hammer pants or men in jumpsuits anymore. But there's one fad that caught on so well, most people don't have any idea that it started life as a fad. Wristwatches. Once upon a time, your watch was on a chain, you kept it in your pocket. A pocket watch, if you will. This changed during World War I when soldiers found that having a watch on their wrist was a lot easier to deal with. In 1916, the New York Times noted that bracelets with clocks in them were something of a joke, and it was a curious European trend. The actual quote was, "a silly ass fad," which is weirdly modern sounding for something written over 100 years ago. Well, the facts of the matter were that soldiers in the war needed ready access to the time for precision communication and movements, and the only way they could manage this was with a wristwatch. Civilians were quick to appreciate the convenience of a wristwatch as well, and the joke fad from Europe soon became a standard around the world. And I personally don't wear a watch, but I do have One of my prized possessions is an officially licensed Dragon Ball Swatch watch in the same coloration as Frieza. I got one for my friend that has the Goku coloration on it, and when we go on nights out, we wear them together, you know, because we're lame. Number 2, the Habeas Corpus Act allegedly passed based on a joke. Habeas corpus protects against unlawful imprisonment. It's one of the basic rights laid out in the Constitution. It's part of the foundation of law in many nations, not just the US. But how the act came to be written has long been alleged to be partially based on, of all things, a joke. Now keep in mind, there's not a lot of evidence that this is true, but it's also one of those this can't be true, can it situations where there isn't a lot of detail refuting it either. But it does make for a good and often repeated story, as we're about to do now. So according to legend, when the Act was signed into English law in 1679, it barely passed the vote. In fact, so the story goes, because it was so close, the assembled laws joked that one of the votes in favour, which came from a man they considered quite fat, should be counted as 10. Order! And so it was. This allowed the bill to pass by 4 or 5 votes. So this story doesn't really hold up too well under scrutiny, but it has been accepted as fact in many circles. And, you know, by me now, because that's hilarious. Number 1. Susanna Salter was nominated for mayor as a joke. There's a popular term on the internet that's abbreviated to FAFO, with the latter 2 letters meaning find out. And the original author is telling you to Google the first 2 if you're unfamiliar. So I'm just going to say it now, and if I get bleeped out, it'll still be funny. Around, find out. Well, the gist of this little acronym is that sometimes if you push too far, you'll end up regretting it. And that's what happened in 1887 in Kansas. Women had just gotten the right to vote that year, and so in the town of Argonia, a group of women came together as part of a temperance movement with the goal of prohibiting alcohol. Now that they had some voting rights, they felt they could make a difference. Among these women was Susanna Salter. One evening, the women were looking to choose a candidate who they could get behind, but several men, who were anti-prohibition, attended the meeting. They mocked the women and then secretly held their own meeting later. They made up ballots and put Salter's name on them to run for mayor. The women had never considered finding a female candidate. They were looking to support men who shared their values. But these men, looking to insult Salter and her group, added her name to ballots they printed as a joke with the expectation that anyone seeing a woman running for mayor, can you believe it, would think she was a complete fool. Back then, you could really just print up ballots because elections were pretty disorganised and no one really gave a shit. The plan backfired horribly when the joke candidate ended up getting massive support from the community, winning the election with 60% of the vote, in the process becoming the first female mayor in American history. So I hope you enjoyed this article. As mentioned, I've been your host, Karl Smallwood. Feel free to make jokes about my name in the comments below, because, you know, it's in the spirit of today's video, which, as mentioned, is based on an original article by Ian Forte. Both of our social links can be found below. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you've got anything to say about it, like any more jokes for us, or about my last name, or about my hosting and presentation style, which I'm hoping is improving with each and every video I do. Otherwise, if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. And as always, have the day you all deserve. Cheers.